Okay, over to our fourth and final finance team, Dunia Bora. This is a team that's transnational, representing Chevening and CSC alumni from Ghana, Zimbabwe, South Africa, and Mauritius. Our presenter will be Keketso Motjuwadi, and the questions will be answered by Estine Clasen. So without further ado, I will hand you over to Team Dunia Bora.
Good day. My name is Keketso Motjuwadi, and I am part of Dunia Bora, and we'd like to welcome everyone to this presentation titled Pricing for Our Future, Africa Emissions Trading Scheme. What has brought us together is the pursuit of practical, large-scale climate change mitigation measures. Such actions require funding, and hence we were presented with the challenge, developing a climate policy solution that generated climate finance for the African continent. Understanding the very real challenge and timeframe we have available to us as a planet, Dunia Bora asked ourselves, is there a policy that could not only mobilize climate finance, but also aid in decreasing greenhouse gas emissions? Next slide. That question led us to our solution, developing an African emissions trading scheme, a cap and trade system covering greenhouse gas emissions open to all countries in Africa. A cap and trade system sets a limit or a cap on emissions from specific sectors, and emission allowances or the right to emit are distributed either for free or through auctions totaling the cap. The total cap is decreased annually, thereby forcing emitters to follow suit. The policy, therefore, would not only reduce GHG emission levels, but the revenue generated through allowance auctions would be utilized in a number of Africa-wide emissions reduction projects and initiatives, such as transitional support to industries, where revenue can be used to assist carbon, energy-intensive, or trade-exposed industries that are significantly impacted by the carbon price, or climate investments, where revenue goes to financing climate change mitigation projects, which serve as carbon sequestration deals that plug into worldwide emission trading systems, or research and development, where funding R&D can be utilized by all participating countries to mitigate and adapt, and agriculture, forestation, and oceanic, where suitable and innovative agro-ecosystem development will be required for Africa to meet our SDGs and reduce deforestation due to an increased pressure on agriculture. Next slide. The primary target communities are high GHG emitting industries, African governmental institutions, developmental financial institutions such as the Africa Development Bank, that we have highlighted as a potential institution to manage the selling of emission allowances to participating scheme members, and vulnerable communities and households, such as low-income households, as they are affected the most by the inequality aggravating effect of climate change. The International Energy Agency reported in 2018 that Africa emitted a total of 1,228 metric megatons of CO2. Placing a price on carbon between $5 and $25 per ton of CO2 shall produce a revenue of $6 to $32 billion respectively. This price bracket was determined by researching current implemented ETSs around the world. The Africa ETS that we are presenting will cover CO2 equivalent emissions, therefore including other gases such as methane and nitrous oxide to be a more holistic solution. Therefore, the revenue generated will be higher than the estimated $6 to $32 billion. Next slide, please. 50 African countries are committed to the Paris Agreement, indicating that the majority would be approachable for a solution such as this in addressing the region's needs. For participating member countries, the AETS will apply to GHG emissions from the power, buildings, construction, transport, and industry sectors, in order to cover an estimated 80% of emissions. For the inaugural year, calculated discounts will be given to sectors depending on their emission levels for transitional assistance, trade exposure, and to prevent carbon leakage. Credits shall then transition to full auctions after. These sectors can trade emission units to meet their target needs. To do this at least cost, emitters can either apply emission mitigation measures or buy emission permits through the simple supply and demand of emission permits, and ETS creates a market price for GHG emissions. Key stakeholders we have identified are national governments, financial institutions, the African Union, high-emitting industries, and carbon sequestration projects. Carbon pricing is a climate policy that can ensure sustainable environmental limits are respected in an economically efficient method, while also taking into account its effect on societal developmental areas. In short, it can mitigate climate change, generate revenue, and address many universal needs. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Keketso. That was incredible. Again, really great timekeeping. I think if people were as efficient with their resources as they were with their time on this call, we'd maybe be in a better place. Judges, I will let you choose who would like to pose a question to Keketso, but if there are more than one, please do write in the box. So can we have a question from the judges?
Can I proceed? Perfect. Thanks again for the excellent presentation. I think we have some very good presenters here today, and I'm very intrigued by what you would have presented. In the case of Africa, could you outline for us the appetite across the African states for a cap and trade system? And if you had to initiate this system, given that, for instance, in the US, this failed because you couldn't get everyone to agree on it, which would be the particular countries within Africa that you would probably say you would proceed with this system first as a pilot that would then facilitate scaling up?
Thank you for the question. So to your first part, it is a valid question with regards to the appetite of such a scheme. So while we're aware that Africa as a whole is one of the lowest emitters, there still exist high emitting industries all over the continent. And for humanity to do its best at combating climate change, we all need to do our part. We as a continent cannot sit idly by and watch as the house burns. We also have to do our part in putting out the blaze. The second part is that carbon pricing presents Africa an opportunity to generate revenue from intra and intercontinental trading that can be utilized for a myriad of benefiting initiatives in the continent. To your second question about which countries we would approach, we've looked at certain individual countries which have high emitting industries, such as South Africa or on the west coast of Nigeria, but then you also find certain African countries that are already plugging into the UN Clean Development Mechanism in order to generate money from having carbon sequestration projects, such as in Gambia, I believe, which recently is now getting paid for their forestation efforts. So we would look at countries on the continent that are high emitters and also already have a massive scope for large-scale